All right, we're live. Thanks for being here, Carol.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was super excited. I found you on LinkedIn, but I believe I found you on LinkedIn through Mark Smith. I think he had mentioned your name in a post about sales. I had Mark on this podcast a long time ago. Probably he was probably close to like the 100th episode or something like that, and he was really fun to talk to. And so, um, me being like a really like I love sales. That's what I do right now. And talking to him, and when he mentioned you, I was like, all right, well, let's do it, right? So
He's
I thought
great.
I, yeah. How do you know Mark?
So I met him through LinkedIn as well. And it's funny you're referencing the post. Here's what happened. And this story makes me so happy because I think it's a testament to the power of networking and the power of LinkedIn to promote yourself, your career, your work, to find other peers and to find customers. So here's what happened. I've known of Mark just because he has a big following. He's a sales leader. He has the experience. So I've been following his journey, but I didn't know him personally. So one day I wake up and I'm tagged in a post by him. And the post was mention the 5 people that, someone should follow or that they're a good influencer. And he had tagged me. And I was like, huh, that's odd. So I sent him a direct message and I said, listen, I know who you are. I doubt you know who I am. I'm assuming this is a typo. However, I wanted to let you know that it put a big smile on my face. Thank you so much. And he responded fairly quickly and said, it's not a typo. I've been loving your posts and your work. And I was like, oh, wow. So that's how that started. And then, I posted a few days ago without mentioning his name that as a woman in sales, even though I've been doing this for forever, I've been a founder, I've had exits through various startups, so I'm an expert in growing companies. I've always felt like a fraud because there's not a lot of women in sales, because I've always had more male than female workers, etc. So I did another post saying someone mentioned my name and I thought it was a typo. And I think it's because of this idea that there's only so much success you can have as a female in startup sales. And I didn't mention his name, but
Mhm.
he commented on the post and said, I've been loving your work. And he was just very nice and very supportive. And the post went viral. I think it had like 10,000 views and a bunch of comments. And I woke up to 500 connection requests on LinkedIn,
Whoa.
which would have never happened, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
saying this to give myself a pat on the back. I'm saying it that if you use the platform the right way and if you're putting yourself out there, I think that a lot of awesome things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Mark is just a really genuine human being to begin with. I loved having him on my podcast. We talked about, and I don't want to make it all about him, but it's just a really cool connection that we had. We talked about all of that, and he's somebody that I really respect, and that's kind of the point of why I brought him up, because when he brought you up, I was like, and then I read some of your work as well on sales and founders and things like that, and yeah, he's awesome. So I'm really glad that we connected. But now tell me, you've done a lot, right? You've been in sales for a really long time. You mentioned this just now, but exited quite a few companies, founded quite a few, expert in sales. What are your projects that you have going on right now?
Well, right now I'm a managing partner at a company called Ramped, and Ramped is a boutique consulting firm. So what we do is we work with early stage founders, early stage technical founders, someone that just raised seed and is on the technical side. They're an engineer, data scientist. They've built the product. They understand the possible applications of it, but sales is a black box for them. So the two main things they struggle with is number one, who do I sell this product to? And number two, after I've identified the different personas, what's my process? How do I go out and get them from a prospect and turn them into a paying customer? So that's what we do. We build out custom sales playbooks for B2B startups, and we do founder sales. We teach founders how to go out and execute. And our focus is to take companies from 0 to 1 million in ARR.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, so I've got a lot of questions because this is going to be a learning time for me. I've been in sales for a long time, over 10 years. I've been successful, but I believe that if you don't stay a student, you that's when that's the only time you can fail, right?
Hmm.
Um, so it's interesting because I've mentioned this before, and I have like a little sales training thing on the side where I help individual salespeople.
That's
But
awesome.
you mentioned that you help people figure out who to sell this product to in the personas.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, in your kind of view, how do you dive into like the marketing side of like a target market? I've always kind of described marketing and sales as like a Venn diagram where you have two distinct, you know, there's two very different sides, but then they kind of mix in the middle. So
Hmm.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And do you kind of, when you're telling people how do they find people to sell to, how do you approach that process?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So, at the beginning, because these are people pre product market fit, they haven't figured that out, there's a
Okay.
lot of assuming. So, what they have is they've built an MVP and now they need to go out and sell it. And let's just say, just to use this as an example, that they believe they're selling to technical folks. And now they need to figure out, is it the CTO? Is it the VP of engineering? Is it another data scientist? And what are these companies? Are they smaller companies? Are they bigger companies? What other tools do they have internally? They need to figure everything out from the get-go. So what I do is I help them figure out what their value add is. What problem are they solving for? How are they doing it different or better than other similar companies out in the space? And that's how we start with our messaging and really figuring out who are we solving this for, right? And a simple method I tell people to use is, I'm solving X problem for Y group of people by doing Z. But to go back to answer your question, it's all like, let's throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what sticks, and let's get the data that we get from the market and go back and iterate on the product if need be. But in the beginning, you don't know. So what you're doing is you're testing out different personas, different sizes of companies, different markets to see who is the low hanging fruit, who has the highest pain point for the problem you're solving right now. And if
Mhm.
you get a response, you double down and focus on that. If not, you keep going till you find the response that you need.
Wow. Okay. I like that a lot. And it's really refreshing to hear you say that because a lot of people will kind of not argue with me, but they'll kind of get a little frustrated when we talk like that, right? At first, when you say things like, at first it's just trying to see who we can sell to and who this works with, because
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest part about sales is really figuring out, like, at first dialing in who you're trying to sell to,
Mhm.
and dialing all of that in. I love that. And then the second part you teach, you help them build a specific playbook for that persona. And what
Exactly.
does that process entail? How do you start building a playbook besides the first step, right, which is finding out who you're going to sell to begin with?
So, if you look at a B2B sales playbook, there's really four main pillars to it. Step one is what we talked about. It's lead gen. Who am I
Mhm.
selling to? Where do these people live? How do I message them? What is my message? Is it LinkedIn? Is it email? Is it, what software am I going to use? Basically, how do I start having these conversations? That's step one.
Okay.
Step two is, you have Dalton and he says, hey, I'm interested. I'm curious to learn more. So step two is qualification, right? How do I know that this person is an opportunity at revenue for me? How do I know that they really have a problem that I can solve? So the idea is having a conversation to identify needs, identify pain points. And I think that honestly, this is where most people miss. And I'll tell you why. Founders that I work with, because they have no sales background, they naturally do not have a sales intuition. So when they hop onto these calls, their first thought is, okay, let me show that person a demo. And then I come in and I say, well, how can you show someone a demo if you don't really know what their needs are? You're just going to blindly pitch. And
Right, right.
that's why people are going to ghost you, because you haven't really understood what their needs are, if your solution can help them, what does the decision making process look like for them, how big this problem is, how urgent it is, if they can afford what you're offering, etc. So that's why we have the discovery before, to see if we can help the client, and if we can, to really identify, okay, what do I need to pitch? When
Yeah.
are they looking to move forward with a solution like this? Do they really have a big problem? How big is the problem, and can they afford it? So step 3 in the process is the qualification. Step 4 is the demo. And the demo is always, let me take what that prospect communicated to me during the discovery call and create a personalized demo based on their needs. And again, I've seen it and I've done it as well when I was selling as an individual contributor, where you just have your cookie cutter pitch deck and you show it to everyone, and you start by talking about your company and why your product is cool and all these other companies that work with you, and the person on the other end of the line is thinking, I don't care. All
Yeah.
I care about is to see if you can solve my problem, right? I don't
Right.
care about the bells and whistles. I don't care about your story. Just show me how you can help me achieve whatever it is I want to achieve. So the way I structure my demos, and I tell my clients to structure their demos, is, of course, your product is not going to change, but your positioning can be very consultative. And there's a phrase we
Mhm.
like to use at Ramped where we say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So show the person that you're caring and that you're truly a consultant by pairing your solution as a response to what they communicated to you during the qualification call. And then, of
Mhm.
course, the next steps are, what's the right pricing for my product? Because also at the beginning, there's a lot of trial and error, right? You don't know
Mhm.
how to price your product when you start. So again, it's testing out the market. And there's little sub steps like setting a proposal, negotiating, and of course, the final step being closing the deal, right? Converting
Yeah.
a prospect into a paying customer. And if you get those more enterprise deals, you can have other steps like construction of a map, mutual action plan, validation event, etc. But if you see at high level the B2B sales cycle, mid market, you have those 4 main steps:
Mhm.
prospecting, lead gen, demo, and close.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned, by the way, because this is one thing that I always, um, I trained salespeople for a little bit, and I couldn't agree more that the number one thing salespeople miss, or business owners in general, is that qualifying step, because it's just unbelievable. I heard, it's an old like gamer thing, but I heard Jeb Blunt, I think, used it, and he said it's like the spray and pray method.
Yeah.
Right, where you you know what I mean? You don't really know what they need, and so you just start talking, and, and that doesn't work. I mean, people can kind of see right through that, and especially if you try to jump right into, like, a pitch, and then you try to jump into, like, maybe a close, because you can't really close somebody if you don't know what their pain points are, in my opinion. At that
Yeah.
point, you're just kind of throwing, like, really hard closes at the wall, and that just it doesn't really land well most of the time, right?
Mhm.
So what are your main pieces of advice for qualifying? Like how do you qualify a customer, a potential
I,
client?
I think the basic parts of qualification are really understanding what their current situation is, pain points, bottlenecks, what's working, what's not working, what they like, what they don't like. Like, understand where they are today and
Mhm.
understand where they want to be, the desired
Yeah.
situation. And what happens is you have these 2 points. You can call it current and desired. You can call it beginning and end. You can call it point A and point B. It doesn't matter. But the idea is that there's these two different states, and they're in the middle, there's a gap, there's opportunity. And your product becomes the bridge to get them from A to B. And if
Mhm.
you're able to demonstrate that, you're gonna win.
Absolutely, and you'll win more than your than other clients because most people don't qualify, like you mentioned before.
And listen, here's the thing. If you're in a very B2C transactional sale, like I remember I've cold a lot, and I would sell into the restaurant industry as part of different startups. And usually in that faster sale where you get to the decision maker fairly quick, the qualification and the demo can often happen on the same call
Mhm.
because you know their needs, they're more universal, they're easier to figure out, there's not multiple decision makers involved. The sales cycle is shorter. We're not talking
Mm.
about $1 million piece of software. So you don't really need it there, right? It can just be a couple of questions and you can pair them either on your initial cold call or with the demo. That's fine. But when you need to be more consultative, when there's several people involved in the decision making process, when budget is higher, when you really need to understand what's going on for them, you really can't sleep on the discovery call.
Mm. Yeah. Especially when there's more at stake, like so and in some of those enterprise sales, it can take a few discovery calls, right? Because you're meeting with the right decision makers, you're trying to get strategic alignment with everybody at the company there. Um, but absolutely, I mean, you're totally right. Either way, it needs to happen because I'm more of like my specialty really kind of lies in like B2C or
Mhm,
um or SMB sales, like SMB mid
mhm.
market, right? Like if we're selling to you know, small stores or restaurants like the smaller ones. I don't have a lot of experience in enterprise, but when I've dabbled in there, when I've had to take over the calls, yeah, it's a whole different ball game. Like you really do have to like slow down to speed up, right?
And I would argue that the SMBs can be harder because making cold calls is hard.
Yeah.
Getting all that rejection is hard. You need to be fast. You need a different sort of mindset, which, I think that if you start from that more transactional sales environment, it's easier to transition to the mid market slash enterprise
Hmm,
versus the
interesting.
opposite. Like, I'd be really curious to see someone that's selling to the C suite pick up the phone and make 150 cold calls to restaurant owners that are gonna like, hang up on them 9 times.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, make 150 and 149 say no.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting that you say that because it was a pretty smooth transition for me. I came from like I started selling way back cars
Oh,
and
man, that's so tough.
yeah, and so like I start and it was this weird like car sales is a very weird sale. Like
It is.
it's retail, but it's also like a lot of calling, a lot of like following up, a lot of like outside stuff. Like we were always out in the community trying to like promote and things like that. But you're right, it wasn't a hard transition. Like I had to learn some of the nuances of like an SMB SaaS kind of transition, outside sales transition. But it's interesting that you say that because now I want to see it. I want to see somebody because I guess, yeah, it would be really hard for a C-suite if you're or somebody who's just like relying on a lot of referrals or something like that to transition to a more like high hands-on sale, right? And hands-on by like lead gen, right?
I mean, the hustle that you need to have selling door to door, selling in person, cold calling, it's just not the same when you're doing that, longer sales cycle consultative sale.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's other things that you need to have as requirements for that, but I find that, and obviously I'm biased because that's the sort of environment I was trained in, but I find that the cold calling, the high volume, the learning the scripts, the learning how to pitch, the relentless over and over and over going after people, the practice, you learn so much and you develop such thick skin that when you transition into the enterprise sale, you're like, oh man, this is easy. This is easy. Like, and this is why people say cold calling doesn't work. No, cold calling does work. You just suck at it because you don't want to put in the work and learn how to do it.
That's right. I never really understood the argument. I had somebody one time, there was like a disagreement there was a question in a local like networking group here in Utah, and somebody brought up cold calling, and what I have found in my experience, the people who hate cold calling are the people who've never done it before.
Mhm.
Like, or maybe they've gotten like a bad one, because somebody was like,
Mhm.
somebody really told me one time, they were like, I never buy from somebody who employs cold calling as like a sales tactic. And I go, there's 0 stores. There's like, I can't think of one. I'm like, do you shop at Walmart? Do you buy any products from Walmart? Because somebody had to cold call Walmart to get their product into Walmart. Somebody had to like interrupt an executive's day at Walmart and say, "Hey, I want to sell my product in there." And got it. You know what I'm saying? Like, even
Yeah.
like your little stuff, they have to, like, I know a bunch of food manufacturers, like chocolate and things like that. They cold call restaurants and grocery chain stores and pop-up stores to get their products in there, right? I'm like,
Cold calling absolutely works. I mean, it
yeah.
depends on the industry you're selling into, to your point. But you know, three startups I worked at as a founding member, that all three of them scaled and became acquired. We sold by cold calling. We'd
Yeah,
call
you
restaurants
just call people.
all day, every day. We'd call restaurants, nail salons, hair salons, garages,
Heck,
doctors. Think of companies like Yelp, right?
yeah.
Or ZocDoc,
Mhm.
or I don't know. There's so many.
Yeah,
How
what
will you reach those people if you do not pick up the phone?
yeah, I you don't have to ask me that. I pick up the phone. You know what I'm saying? But it's just a weird, every time I see somebody who's like cold calling is dead or something like that, I'm like, you're just not doing it right or something. Something's wrong. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know.
Listen, it's hard. It's not
Yeah.
pleasant getting hung up on all day, every day. I
Yeah.
think you know it's very mentally taxing, and it combines fear of public speaking. You know, if you're in a room full of sales reps and you're calling, it's fear of failure.
Mm.
It's very, very hard. But I truly believe that because it's very hard, if you're able to do that successfully, you can sell anything to anyone. Everything else will seem like a piece of cake.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. What sales books do you recommend the most? What sales books do you find yourself recommending all the time?
You know, I never really recommend sales books because
Okay.
I recommend psychology books, because sales is human psychology. And every buying decision that we make is emotional. Like, think about it this way. If I want to, you know, if I get a big bonus, right, and I want to go
Mhm.
buy myself a nice bag, I don't know, right? Or when
Yeah.
someone says I'm saving up to go buy a nice car, or when someone
Yeah.
says I'm going to go buy a watch. Like, any watch can tell time. You don't need a
Right.
Rolex, you don't need a Cartier. It's
Yeah.
emotional, it's a status thing, right? And that's the
Yeah.
case with all our buying decisions. So when I started selling, someone said to me, you know, try to understand human psychology. So a book I read early on, which I love, is Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini,
Mhm.
who's a doctor of psychology at Stanford, I believe. And he did a lot of research on sales floors, um, different cold calling businesses, the industry we were just talking about, my brain got stuck, you know, selling cars.
Oh,
He
yeah,
would
yeah, yeah.
go talk to salespeople and really study them and figure out what are the different principles of selling. And there's 7 different ones. So I think that's a great book to read. A book I recently read that I loved, and again, it's not a sales book. It's called Atomic Habits by
Oh,
James
yeah.
Clear. because sales is about setting the right habits and, setting the structure to enable yourself to be successful. So Atomic Habits helps you do that. It understands why we build habits, how our brain works, what's an easy way to do it, how to keep yourself accountable, etc. Which is not directly selling advice, but it's the building blocks that you need to be successful in sales environment.
Absolutely. I love both of those books. Influence, Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits brings up a really good conversation we can have. Um, at, as I'm speaking to an expert in sales, because a lot of the goals that we have in sales are out of our control, but it's still a results driven industry. And by the way, I'm
Mhm.
not suggesting that it shouldn't be results driven. I'm probing into the idea that our goals should be more like James Clear talks about, which are habits, right? So like I talked about this in an interview I released today and a video, a YouTube video I did earlier about like these kind of sales cultures that have like if you only make one phone call that day and you sell one, like are you done, right? Like I don't care if you make 50 if you hit your quota, like 50 dials or whatever if you hit your quota. And I just never really understood that, mainly because like the high performers I know and that I and when I've done these is
Mhm.
like you have to just make them, right? Like habitually we make them regardless, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear your thoughts on like goal setting in sales when a lot of
So
it is out of
is
our
your
control.
question, if I get my job done with less, um, should that be accepted? Is it? I just want to make sure I give you a straight answer.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess that was more of an example. My
Okay.
question is, how should salespeople set goals?
Okay. So I think that if you do the work, you'll get the results, right?
Yeah,
So I'm taking it a step back. The goals are typically, unfortunately, not set by you, they're set by your company. You have certain quota you need to hit. For
right.
me, now that I'm my own boss, right? I work with my co-founder and CEO at Ramp, and we sell clients to our solution. We've come up with goals for ourselves. And the way I'm looking at those goals, because I'm my own salesperson, uh, I'm thinking, what are the actions I need to take that will get me there? So, for example, if I need to close 10 clients a month, and I'm just making this number up, what are the actions I need to take to close those clients? For example, how many messages will get me a discovery call? Or how many calls do I need to make to set up a discovery call? Or how many emails do I need to send? How many discovery calls convert into a demo? How many demos convert into a paying customer? You need to know your metrics. And
Mhm.
that's what's going to determine the effort that you put. How many dials you need to make, how many hours you need to spend practicing your pitch, whatever it is you need to do, right? But your outcomes or your goals will determine your systems.
Right.
And you need to have systems in place to be able to accomplish what your goals are.
Yeah. And I guess that was like the main question, right? Was because it's just so crazy. Like people focus, like salespeople get so focused on their quota, and they should be focused on their quota, right? Like I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but we get so focused on that that we kind of lose sight of the habits that we have to like implement so that we can hit the goal.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that's where I get like all kind of fired up is because I just you can't be and Atomic Habits, like James Clear mentions this, where you can't be like static with your goals or like with your habits, right? Like habits are something like you do every day, and I think that good habits are like good goals are centered around like your habits. So that, and I guess there might be a little difference between like the quotas we have and then the goals that we set for ourselves to hit the quota, right?
I think he mentioned something really interesting where, I don't remember verbatim what he says, but the idea is, let's say you want to lose weight, right? You want to lose 10 pounds. And you're thinking, okay, I'm going to eat less, or I'm going to eat healthier, or I'm going to go to the gym X amount of times a week, etc. These are the things I need to do to be 10 pounds less. But the truth is, or a better way to think about it is, if I was a person that weighed 10 pounds less, what would my life look like? What would I be doing? What would be my everyday habits or
Mm,
structure, whatever you want to call it? So you
yeah.
want to envision yourself, you want to adapt the identity of the person that's already there and act as if. And to
Hmm.
me, that's really helpful because I'm thinking, okay, if I want to hit my 10 clients a month, it's not just about my metrics. What do I need to put myself into the best position to win? So, for example, I'm a morning person. My brain works best in the morning. And also, I don't get distracted in the morning because if I start working early, most of my clients are asleep. So I don't get distracted by Slack, LinkedIn, whatever it is. So I know that if I'm at my desk by 6 a.m., between the hours of 6 and 9 a.m., I get so much work done and I still have the whole day to do whatever it is I need to do. Not
Yeah.
only will I end my day earlier, but if something comes up and I need to stay up, later, I will. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't sleep and we should work all day and we should wake up with the crack of dawn and work. No, it's whatever works for you. But for me, that's a system that works, that delivers the goals I've set for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. What do you think about the current atmosphere of not of companies not being able to hire salespeople?
Are you talking about the great resignation and just talent being super thin?
Yeah, but I feel like it's affecting the sales world a little more than there is a great resignation kind of all across the board, but I
Mhm.
feel like there's a shortage of salespeople, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I don't think there's a shortage of salespeople. I think that post COVID, we're in an era that no one could have ever imagined 2 years ago, and people just have a different attitude towards what's important to them. And
Mm.
it used to be a relationship where, you have your boss and you do what your boss says. And I'm not saying you should defy your leadership and go against them, but I think the relationship is more equal. Where if companies want to attract top talent, they need to pay better or be more flexible and hybrid versus being in the office, for example, or more days off or better benefits or whatever it is. People just have more choices, and I think we're all changing. We've all changed our priorities, what's important to
Mhm.
us, what do we want work life balance to look like. So you have more choice. You're saying, no, I'm not going to go work for this company that wants me to be in the office 5 days a week because I've realized for me it's more important to spend more time with my spouse,
Mhm.
things like that. So that's why it seems like there's less sales talent. I don't think that there's less sales talent. I think that people are more picky, as they should be,
Mm.
for what types of companies they want to go work for.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I like that. So kind of shifting, because I just have a lot of questions that I wrote down,
Yeah, go for it.
and I know we're gonna, come up on time quicker than I want. But when you're starting a company
Uh-huh.
and you're going through the growing pains of that, what's if you could pinpoint one, like the most important thing that a new startup could do to to ensure success, or to at least give them the best chance of success, what would that be? Like, is it a trait? Is it a process that they need to have nailed down? Um, what do you think it is?
That's such a loaded question. I don't even know where to start, but I'll try my best.
All right, deal.
I think that, and I'm saying this because of the work that I do, because I work with founders and I teach them how to sell. I
Yeah.
think it's the founder's responsibility to learn how to be not the CEO, but the chief storytelling officer.
Mm,
Like, I think it's so important for early founders to get their story straight, to get their elevator pitch straight, to figure out what their value add is, to figure out who they're selling to, and go
mhm,
do that. There's a big misconception. I don't know how it started, but it blows my mind every single time where I talk to people. They've built an MVP and they have this perception that customers will just come. And I'm thinking,
mhm.
no, they won't. Like, no, they won't.
Yeah,
You need to go find them. Go talk to
yeah,
these people.
yeah.
And when you know how to sell as a founder, it becomes a superpower because before you build your team, you're always selling. You're selling to the press, you're selling to the first customers, and eventually you're going to sell
Mhm.
the dream to your first hires and convince those people to come work for you.
Yeah.
So you need to learn how to communicate what your startup does, why you
Mhm.
started, what you're solving for, what the future looks like. I think that's your number one job. And you don't need to have VC money. You don't need to have fancy marketing or PR. If you can afford it and you have it, even better, but you don't need it. You
Mhm.
just need to go out and start and see, is my assumption correct? Do people want this product that I build? Who needs it? When do they need it? What are my next steps? You need to figure that out. That would be sort of my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think you're right on though, because that's been my experience. Like I work with like small business owners, and who small business owners who specifically like don't want to sell. And I'm like, look, that's fine if you don't want to sell, but you need to know how to do it, and you need to get the first few, because to your point, when you're selling that vision to new employees, it's really hard to grab a seasoned sales consultant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And bring them into nothing. Like that's really hard to do.
100% why people quit. That's the number one way to have employee churn. Because here's the
Yeah.
thing, salespeople, no matter how seasoned you are, first
Yeah.
of all, you don't pay them enough for them to come in and build processes for you.
Right.
Secondly, most
Yeah.
salespeople don't know how to do it because they haven't had to do it before. And imagine if it's a super technical product, no one knows your product as well as you do when you're a founder. So if you want to
Mm,
attract top talent and you want to make it easy for them to succeed, you need to have some processes in place and you need to be able to
right.
explain to them, this is how I did it versus them coming into nothing.
Yeah. Excuse me. I like that you said that. Like, this is how I did it, because it's really hard to bring a team on that's like, and I've talked about this too. Like, I went to school for accounting and finance. And as a business owner, the most important thing you can do is like know enough about everything, you know, because you want to have like intelligent conversations. You want to know like what's actually getting done. You want to know how it's moving, and you can't do that if you don't know sales at least, right? And you haven't done it at least. Same thing with accounting or finance. Like really hard to have an intelligent conversation with your accountant if you don't know what a
Mm-hmm.
balance sheet is, right? Like, and so I like that. That's interesting. What made you want to get into sales in the first place? I guess I could have asked this earlier, but I was really excited for the conversation. What pushed you into sales?
I think it was accidental. And to be
Okay.
honest with you, I don't know of anyone, like anyone, that grows up saying, oh man, I want to be a salesperson when I grow up. It's my dream. No one
Yeah.
ever. People want to be all kinds of things, but I think that because there's so many negative stereotypes against sales and selling, it's not typically someone's dream. I kind of fell into it. I have a degree in something very much irrelevant to what I do right now. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And my first job out of college was selling cheese for my sister's company. I was working for her, selling cheese, demoing the product in different grocery stores. And a few months in the job, I realized that non-dairy milks was something that was missing from the market. So my boyfriend and I at the time, and we were both super young, we're like 22, 23. We decided to start a company manufacturing a non-dairy milk and selling it to health stores. So we rented
Whoa.
a little kitchen in Brooklyn and we were manufacturing and distributing and selling that product, and somehow that company got acquired, God knows how. And after that, I joined my first startup. So I fell into it. And I always say I
Uh-huh.
was an accidental founder. And at the beginning, I was an accidental salesperson, but I really liked it. And I realized that I get paid to talk. And if I talk well, I can make a lot of money. So, I learned how to do it, and I've
I
been
love
doing
it.
it for a while.
I love that. That's really fun. I think so wow, your first business was a manufacturing business, was a non-dairy milk manufacturing business and distribution business?
We had a tiny little kitchen in Brooklyn, and we were importing nuts from Spain, and we were making this nut milk and bottling it and packaging it and going into little
Wow.
little stores in New York and selling it and
Wow.
asking people, "Would you like to try some?"
That's an easy sell.
There
Yes,
you
I
go.
would.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Holy cow, that's a lot of fun. And since then that's kind of all that's history. The rest is history. You got into fur, you started selling cheese, started selling uh your non-dairy milk, and then that was it. You just got the bug. And it's funny that you say that because I had a story growing up where when I was growing up in high school, did um like here they have, or at least I mean I think they have them in all high schools, but they do like the most likely to blank awards in high school. You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
And when I was in high school, I would just we didn't call it selling. They just like I grew up in a really poor town in Iowa, and it was just hustling. Like that's just what they called it, right? And we would just sell whatever. Like I remember I saw one day at the playground, the school was selling like treats,
Uh-huh.
and they were so expensive, and I knew that I could buy them for cheaper and sell them and make a profit and still sell them cheaper than what
That's
they
awesome.
so I started selling. My first sales job was like illegal candy sales on the playground.
There you go. Listen,
And
why not?
yeah, I that's what I said. I was like, well, we can do it. And so there were ring pops. I don't know if you remember the. I think they're still around, but like ring pops. And anyway, though, so that happens, and in high school we just sold. I sold whatever. Like one time, bought like a bunch of. My mom bought a bunch of like store pull ties, and I would sell ties on the corner. And anyway, that was like my story. So I graduate high school, and they do those like most likely to awards, and mine was most likely to be a con man
Oh
because
my gosh.
nobody knew what sales was in my hometown.
See, that's the negative connotation with sales.
Exactly.
You think of
Yeah.
this sleazy salesperson that's trying to trick you and take your money, and that's not what it is. I mean, sales
Right.
is the lifeblood of every business. No
Yeah.
business can survive without sales.
Absolutely. And that was just the point that I was trying to make. Is it's just funny that's like the perception people have. Like I wasn't conning any. I was like I was doing what Walmart was doing. I was buying cheap candy, selling it, and selling it at enough margins to where I could restock my candy and have a little bit
Yeah,
left over.
yeah,
Yeah. And I was beating out the local competition. That's capitalism. I don't know what to tell you on that one.
that's called being smart. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, and so we just had fun, but it's just that kind of like that yeah, that connotation behind salespeople. And I think where people get, because I had friends like, how can you buy it so cheap and sell it for more than you bought it on? I'm like, listen, for better or for worse, this is the society that we live in. Like we gotta figure out how to make it work. But I thought it was anyway. It's just to your point. It's just funny that we're in these like situations. I love that story though. It's awesome. What do you think has been the biggest contributor to your success?
Work,
Just working,
working
just
hard at it. Yeah, like
more than anybody else.
you know what it is. So I had started that business. We made a little bit of money when we sold it, and when I started cold calling and I joined my first startup essentially, I was very bad. I mean, very bad. We had like a 3-month ramp, and I was in month 2, and I had closed 0 sales. And I was thinking, I'm gonna lose my job. So I had two managers. It was a very small team. We had two managers at the time, and I went up to both of them and I said, "Y'all really need to help me because I can't lose this job." And I remember I went in for an interview on Christmas Eve, and this was back in 2013. And I remember telling my boyfriend at the time that if they give me $30,000 as a base, I'm going to be happy. Because that's what cold callers were making back then.
Yeah.
And they gave me 40,000 as my base. And I went home thinking, that's so much money. Oh my gosh, that's so much money. How lucky am I to have gotten this job? So I started working there and I really wanted to do well, and everyone was very nice. But I wasn't. So I went up to both managers and was like, I really need this job. Please help me. So I would stay at the office till 10, 11 o'clock every night, listen to calls, listen to other people's cold calls, practice the script with the managers who were both generous enough to help me. There were a couple of people that were top performers, and I went up to them and I was like, can I listen to your calls? Can I shadow you? Can I buy you lunch? What do I need to do to figure this out? And I swear to you, by the end of 3 months, not only did I not get fired, but I had hit my quota. I got a promotion right after that, and I was one of the top female reps countrywide. And it's not because I was smarter than anybody else, but I
Hmm.
wanted to succeed so bad that I did. So that's why I'm saying it's work. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
Hmm.
Unless you need some specific talent, right? To be a singer, you need to sing well. To, act, you need to have a certain talent. Unless you need a certain talent to perform a job, there is no reason why you cannot succeed. And I think that's especially true in sales, where to your earlier point, you're always learning. I want to get better. There's 1,000 different things available to me. There's
Hmm.
books, there's podcasts, there's webinars, there's workshops, there's free stuff and paid stuff. I can get a mentor, I can read on LinkedIn, I can listen to my own calls. There's nothing keeping you from being successful. It's just yourself. And sales is the number one place where that is true. We're not doing open heart surgery. It's not hard.
Yeah, heck yeah. That's awesome. And yeah, it's couldn't have said it better. People just need to work, and you just need to be scrappy, and you need to
Mhm.
figure out if you're willing to do whatever it takes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, being
That's amazing.
scrappy is huge. We used to say that in one of the startups I used to work at, that I really loved being there and they're doing amazing things. We used to say being professionally scrappy, like where
Mhm.
your customers don't know that you're being scrappy and you look all cool and composed, but really you're hustling. You're
Yeah.
hustling and you're not necessarily showing that, but you're doing whatever it takes to get the meeting, to get the deal, to show up, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. I think you're 100% right. Well, you've been more than generous with your time. I'm really glad that you decided to come on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you? How can people get a hold of your services at Ramped?
I'm on LinkedIn more than I should be. I'm on LinkedIn all day, every day. So my handle is just my name, Carol Malakasis. If people want to send me a connection request or a message, I respond to everything. Would love to connect. And then our website is www.rampd.co.
Cool. Wow. Well, thank you so much again for being here. I really appreciated it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.